My name is Susan Brown. I direct the Center for Better Bones. Really happy to give this talk today on vitamin D. Really happy and grateful to Wendy to have this wonderful room. She offers to the community all her work to organize the community, to educate the community. We're going to educate you today something about really fantastic, a simple thing we call vitamin D that can really dramatically change the health of you and everyone around the world. In fact, we say, the research says, it's the simplest thing you could do to improve health worldwide is to provide for adequate vitamin D. That seems like a big claim. I'm going to show you the story. My assistant, John Paul, is here. John Paul is going to be handing out, he's right in the back there, handsome guy. He's at Syracuse University, and he's helping us out. He's going to give you some handouts. And we also have a sign-up sheet for a blog. I work with bone health, and I write a blog that now goes to 200,000 people every week. And if you're interested to know what we're doing here and the latest tips on bone health, just sign up. It's a little email that'll come to your email box if you want. And we'll be happy to share that information. We often write about vitamin D. Right now I probably have 200 blogs you can go back and look at and see what I have to say about vitamin D or vitamin K or calcium, whatever you want. It's a wonderful resource. Okie doke. So Jean Paul's got those things. I want you to be sure to sign up. And the other thing I want you to be sure to do, this is a little premature, but I want you to write out the evaluation for Wendy. She takes so much trouble, and she puts, money into advertising these elements. She wants to know, do people like the talk? Is it what's useful? What could be changed? So a lot of times we rush out. We don't fill this out. So think about doing that. That would be helpful to Wendy. Okie dokie. So anybody hear me talk on vitamin D before? Looks like a lot of new faces. Some talks I give, a lot of my clients and friends come, but I don't know if I've seen any of you people before. Have I? Oh, nice. Well, that's what I needed to hear before I started. But well, I mean to say, I'm glad there's so many new people. It's a pleasure to us. It's a wonderful service to be able to share this information that we spent so long studying. The reason I got interested in vitamin D is because I work with bone health. This is our website, betterbones.com. We have hundreds of articles on how to build bone and maintain bone health naturally. The biggest website in the world on natural bone health. And you can see we have a lot of basic things about exercise, alkaline diet, thinking about osteoporosis. We have popular articles, fall prevention, how to speed fracture healing, all these things. And then we have the blog. We have consultations that I do. You can even assess your fracture risk on this site. And lots of videos. We have a YouTube channel. There's a lot going on if you're interested in bone health. The work with bone health has caused me to get involved with vitamin D. And you're going to see why in a little bit, why I'm such a champion, such a promoter of vitamin D. The books, the Acid Alkaline Food Guide is one book I wrote. Another thing I spend a lot of time on is pH balance. pH balance is very important for muscle, for blood pressure, for bone, for the prevention of kidney stones, for the prevention of cancer. It's interesting. I'm an anthropologist. My first profession is an anthropologist. And what we see in anthropology is we evolved eating lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. That was an alkaline diet. Our kidney, our genetics demand that we have an alkaline diet, or else we have to draw reserves out of our bone and out of our muscle. So to protect bone, you need an alkaline diet. Vitamin D is the same story. It has its roots in anthropology because we evolved in sunlight. And every single tissue responds to vitamin D. It's just a natural part of our physiology that occurred because of our evolution in sunlight. And if you think about it, the sun is the source of all the energy for the planet. And the body responds to sun in many, many ways, but vitamin D is one way that every tissue responds. And you're going to see the extent of that. It's really very impressive how we depend on vitamin D, how naturally our body evolved with high exposure to sunlight. The other book is Better Bones, Better Body. This is about bone health. So the vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin that could save your life. If you think about it, the research on vitamin D is interesting. This is 10 years ago. This is comparing vitamin D research, and you see the gigantic increase in vitamin D research over 10 years. This is looking at vitamin A. This is another vitamin. You see it's kind of flat. Even though it's a nice vitamin, it's important. There's not as many clinical studies on it. We know more about vitamin D now. We've learned more in the last 10 years than we have learned over the whole decade. I mean to say over the whole century. more in the last 10 years than over the whole century. And that's because they have started to look at vitamin D. They've discovered that vitamin D has many functions in the body, and that it's just not related to bone, but many, many things, and that every organ has receptors for vitamin D. And having those receptors, you got to wonder, well, why does it have a receptor for vitamin D? And now we're finding out that there's actions of vitamin D on every tissue. So the research alone makes us think, hey, there's something going on here. People are studying it a lot. When we think of vitamin D, we often think of rickets. Anybody know about rickets or hear about rickets? What's that?
I've heard about it.
You've heard about rickets, yeah. Rickets are when you don't have, in children, if you don't have enough vitamin D, the bones, well, if you don't have enough vitamin D, you can't absorb calcium, right? Now, why is calcium important? Calcium is important for bone, but you know why else calcium is important? And even more important, your blood. The blood has to have a very specific level of calcium or you die. And so Mother Nature said, no problem, we're going to fill these bones with calcium. So when you're sleeping at night or when you don't eat, you can still take calcium out of the bones and put it into the blood. Every day we move 500 milligrams of calcium from the bone into the blood, mainly at night when we sleep and are not eating. And then we hopefully put that 500 milligrams, we digest new calcium and put it back into the bone. A constant dynamic exchange. Vitamin D is essential for that. You cannot absorb calcium without vitamin D. And so when you don't have vitamin D, you get a lot of bone problems and you get bone weakness. And rickets is one of those, that you develop these bowed legs. People often ask me, as an anthropologist, why did I get interested in osteoporosis? I always say I've studied it so much it qualifies me for a direct ticket to Hutchins Institute. And it's really true. I kind of got carried away with it because it's such a fascinating thing. But it was because my grandmother at 102 died of a hip fracture. My grandmother fell in the bathtub at 101. Now you got to wonder what we were doing letting her live alone and take a bath at 101. That's like, this is country living. And she had rickets and osteoporosis. And how do we know she had rickets? Because she had bowed legs. I didn't recognize it until a friend of mine from South America, when I was already teaching at a university, said, you know, your grandmother has osteoporosis and rickets. She was humped over. She had bowed legs. She never complained a day. She'd hobbled around. I have this wonderful video. I wish I'd brought it. But she was the most positive person, but we were looking at it. We thought, well, this is just old age. Now we realize it was both osteoporosis and rickets. She had stomach surgery for an ulcer, and she just ate tomatoes and white bread. And she was a farmer's wife, but they had gigantic responsibilities, taking care of all the workers, taking care of the school teachers. She didn't get out in sunlight. And so it's a very interesting story. Then I thought, wow, how long would she have lived if she didn't have osteoporosis and rickets and didn't fall and break a hip at 101? And you know what she said when she fell? She fell. They said, let's go to the doctor. She said, no, I've been there before. She said, I'm going to go to bed. She said, I've taken care of my boys for 100 years. They can take care of me. And that's exactly what she did. She went to bed. She was the most delightful, happy person. She spent a year in bed. She would watch, I remember this, she would watch Ronald Reagan on the TV as president, and she'd say, he was so much fun when he was selling Sylvania light bulbs. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but Ronald Reagan was first selling light bulbs. She's my inspiration to study this, thinking, geez, how many lives are handicapped because of poor bone health? So anyway, that's how I got into it. My grandmother, and rickets, in adults they call it osteomalacia, but this is rickets. Now this is London in 1645. How many kids do you think had rickets? What percentage of the population, the children? The majority. And you know what it was? By 1900, more than 90% of the children in the Netherlands, in the cities of Netherlands, and 80% of Boston had rickets. And that was because it was the Industrial Revolution. There was lots of smog. These kids were sent to factories to work. They did not get sunlight exposure. It was such a gigantic problem that they had to start looking for a solution, because what happens when an adult has rickets? Their pelvis is not formed well, so the women can't give birth. This is when cesarean births became popular, because they had to cut the women open to get the vitamin D out, because you would die in childbirth because the pelvis wasn't formed right. And so rickets has a really important history, and they discovered that just a small amount of cod liver oil would correct this thing with rickets, and that's how the researchers only at the turn of the century, began to figure out that they began to identify this substance. Later it was identified as a vitamin D. And only just small amounts will help with rickets. What we're going to see is you need higher amounts for other health benefits. So today, 100 years later, now there's been a blizzard of research on vitamin D, and that blizzard is like the last 10 years. Thousands of studies showing that vitamin D levels are very clearly linked to 18 types of cancer. We're going to talk about this a little. Diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, dramatic reductions in both cancer and diabetes amongst people with better levels of vitamin D. Heart disease, stroke, hypertension are all associated. There's much higher incidence amongst people with low vitamin D. Autoimmune disease, as it turns out, vitamin D regulates immune functioning. It turns off the aggressive self-attack of autoimmunity. Seasonal effect disorder. Let me see if I can get it back here. Oh, here. Seasonal effect disorder. And I think it was even one slide before this here. And dental disease and much more. So we're finding out a whole string of disorders. And what they did the last 10 years is when they started realizing, hey, this vitamin D, there's something to it. They would have studies here, like 20 years ago, they might have studied 1,000 soldiers. Then they had their blood frozen. So then they go back and they look. Then they say, okay, now this is 20 years since then. They say, let's see who developed cancer. Let's see who developed diabetes. And then they go back and look at their blood and say, geez, everyone who got cancer had low vitamin D, or most everyone. Everyone who got diabetes had lower vitamin D. That's how they did the studies originally. Now what they're starting to do is intervention studies, where they take a bunch of people here, they give them 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 units of vitamin D. They watch them go into the future. What kind of reduction do you get in cancer? What kind of reduction in diabetes? They've only done a few studies like this. The ones they did on cancer, some of them are very impressive, like 50, 60, 70% reduction in cancer with this vitamin D. We're going to talk about a few of those studies. So the studies I'm going to report now, a lot of them are from observational studies looking back at the data. Now the research is showing these are the disorders that are clearly linked. Osteoporosis and rickets, they're two different disorders. They have the same kind of bone weakening problems, multiple sclerosis, and many autoimmune diseases like psoriasis, like Crohn's and irritable bowel. And that's because the immune system, the white blood cells, are greatly affected by vitamin D. And vitamin D is actually a very excellent immune enhancer and stabilizer. New research on autism and the links between the possible influence of vitamin D on autism, bipolar disorder. The work on diabetes is really very clear. Type 1 diabetes, the major researchers say, could be totally eradicated with vitamin D. In Finland, years ago, they gave children on birth 2,000 units of vitamin D a day for a year, and they reduced the incidence of childhood diabetes by about 70%. It's very, very dramatic. And you'll see, I'm going to give you a resource, a website, an interesting story about vitamin D, of how a lot of this information became available to the public. And it pertains to this chart, this vitamin D action chart, this very colorful chart. Now, this was a woman. Let's tell the story right now. This was a woman, Carol Beggerly. In fact, I had her come to talk a few years ago in Drumlins. Anybody go to that talk? It was probably 5, 6 years ago. Carol Beggerly had breast cancer. She developed breast cancer. She was a business person, and she was retired. She developed breast cancer, and so her son said to her, you know, Mom, I'm seeing some research. He was looking at the data banks on vitamin D in cancer. So she, being a determined and outgoing person, she looked up where the NIH, where they had funded research. She went to the meetings where the researchers were talking to one another about this. She said there were beautiful tables and all these researchers with expensive microphones. So they were saying all this research. Well, they're seeing a lower incidence of cancer, lower incidence of diabetes. She said she couldn't resist. And you can hear her story. This was on her website. She said, I couldn't resist, so I took that expensive microphone. I said, doctors, why don't you ever tell the public? And they said, the moderator said, well, you know, we can't. We don't have the double-blind studies. We don't have these studies, like 20 years, look in to see what happens in 20 years. She said, yeah, but the data is really strong from what you're seeing today. Nope, she says, we can't do it. So then, after that meeting, some of the major researchers came up to her and they said, you know, we have sympathy with you. You're absolutely right. We should start telling the public. And these were the major vitamin D researchers. And now she has a very big institute called Grassroots Health, and it's grassrootshealth.net. They have vitamin D action groups all over the world. They developed this chart that we're going to talk about, the chart looking at all the research and saying how much could you reduce breast cancer, how much could you reduce MS, how much could you reduce fracture if you took vitamin D. Looking at the research and the studies, they now have the University of California behind them. They have a lot of videos. Their website, I'll list for you later. It's grassrootshealth.net. In fact, it's probably on here. At least the Grassroots Health part is. That group has a phenomenal. If you question anything I say, that group has all the documentation there. And she, since just one person who stood up and said, you know, I think this is not fair. Women could benefit and people could benefit a lot if they knew, has inspired a great deal of research. In fact, when I saw her, I said, well, okay, you just have to start your website. You just have to get people to fund you, and that's what she did. She's got all kinds of people funding her. She's a very dynamic person. They have projects of vitamin D adequacy all over the world, including Japan and many parts of the world. And they're showing all these diseases being impacted by vitamin D. This is their chart, actually. Now, let's just take a second. This is the chart. We picked out two things for you to take home. This chart, because this chart's going to show you the science. And the second page is the page that tells you, well, what do you do? How do you test your vitamin D? How do you know what your level is? Right? So here's the vitamin D chart. These are some of the diseases they looked at. All kinds of cancers, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, Hodgkin's, these cancers, type 1 diabetes, fractures, falls, MS, heart attack, kidney cancer, endometrial cancer. This is basically looking at cancers and some of these autoimmune things and diabetes. So if you start like with things we talked about, rickets, all you need is a little vitamin D. If you have even this, now this is the measurement of vitamin D. 25-OHD is vitamin D. So that's the blood test you want. And the measurement is in ng/ml. And you're going to hear me talk, and you'll see on our chart, our second chart here, that the ideal level is 50 to 60. 50 to 60. So with just a little bit of vitamin D, just 6, you can present 50% of rickets. If you get up to 20, you can present 99% of all rickets. So rickets is totally a vitamin D deficiency disease. When you get to something like falls, and I'm going to explain to you later why falls can be reduced by 72% when you get to 30 vitamin D. When you look at things like multiple sclerosis, they find when you get to 46 to 56, you have from a 33 to a 54% reduction. Increases as the vitamin D level gets higher. This is your risk of getting that disease. The cancer things are probably the most outstanding, the cancer studies. It is speculated in breast, in all kinds of cancer combined, if you get even to a 40 or 38, and the studies, they used calcium, because the studies weren't looking at cancer, because they never thought vitamin D would help cancer. They were looking at bone health. So they gave vitamin D in bone, and they found incidentally a 77% reduction in cancer. When they looked at breast cancer in particular, 34 would get about a 30% reduction. If you get up to 50, about an 83% reduction. Now this, of course, knowing the cost of cancer, the travail of cancer, you'd say, wow, we should pay attention to this. We should try to, and this is when the researchers stood up and said, look, we know these aren't like double-blind studies that have been carried on for 25 years, but this is pretty strong data, and so they joined up with her. And it's a wonderful thing because there's no harm done with vitamin D. All we're trying to do, if you imagine people who lived out, we're talking about 50, 60 being the better level, and sure enough, this is where you see all this disease prevention. If you think 40 to 60 ng to prevent a majority of these diseases, and if you think about people, as an anthropologist, and it probably occurred to you, you said, well, what the heck? What's the natural vitamin D level? How would we know what the natural vitamin D level is? Who would we look at? Yeah, we look the blood level of people living out there in the savannah, people who came where we from, people who lived in the tropics, didn't have many clothes, where humans evolved. And these people have like a 50 level. And they've recently done some research amongst some African groups, and they found, yep, sure enough, that's the level they have. And that's all we're saying is get back to this level. Get back to the natural level if we lived exposed to sunlight. Today, we don't expose ourselves to sunlight much because of work, because of a fear for skin damage, a whole bunch of things. But mostly we're not outdoors very much. And in this climate, and in any climate that's north of Atlanta, you cannot produce vitamin D from October till April anyway, because we're going to talk about that, because the slant of the sun is not, it's a very small spectrum. If you think of that sun, it gives out unfathomable energy in all different frequencies. It's only one frequency that produces vitamin D. It's a small frequency of UVB radiation, and we don't get that in the winter because of the slant of the sun. And you know how you can tell if you're, one of the major researchers told me, it's the cutest thing. How do you know, if you're out in the sun and you say, how do I know if I'm producing vitamin D? You can tell if your shadow is shorter than you are. So you go outside, because that means the sun is somewhat directly above you. You have that particular spectrum. And you'll notice, you'll see it. If you go out at noon in the summer, you got it. If you go out at 5 o'clock, you start saying, no, my shadow's getting longer than I am. It's a very simple thing to do when your shadow is longer than you are. Well, if you have these diseases, you want to make sure your vitamin D is adequate. And I'm going to show you how to do that, because it can help your recovery from this disease. We're going to talk about all this. And the nice thing is, Wendy, is we have a lot of time. We'll get to everybody's questions. So I'm just going to give you, and you can certainly chime in with your questions right now too, but I just want to, and that's fine. We'll get to the little content going. So the question is, though, okay, Susan, this is interesting. Why, you say you can reduce cancer by 40, 50, 60%. You say you can do away with type 1 diabetes. How is it possible? Why is vitamin D so powerful? Give me your ideas. I'm sure you know. I'm sure some of you know the secret. Because it goes to every cell. And most of all, it's not a vitamin.
Nobody knows if that's why.
Well, here's what happens. The thing we call vitamin D is a thing that we produce on exposure. There's like a cholesterol substance in the skin. On exposure to a particular light radiation, we produce this compound called vitamin D, this substance. That substance, the body then turns into a hormone. So it's not like a vitamin like vitamin A or vitamin B. It's actually the precursor of a hormone. And that hormone, hormones are chemical messengers that tell cells what to do. That hormone tells lots of cells what to do, whether it's immune cells, prostate cells. And how did they discover this? They discovered that they started looking around. They said, what the heck? There's receptors for vitamin D in the prostate. There's receptors for vitamin D in the breast tissue. Why would this be? Why would the body have receptors if it doesn't use it? And then they realized that these tissues can actually produce active vitamin D themselves. It's interesting. I just got back. I was telling my friend here, Susan, I just got back from a meditation course with this wonderful teacher called Saima. She's one of these elevated gurus, and she's always talking about, I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to activate it. We think, woo, that's kind of hocus pocus. But that's exactly what happens in the body, right? It takes this substance of vitamin D and it activates it. It turns it into a hormone. And then that hormone affects every tissue, every organ in the body. And in turn, the organs in the body can say, look, I really need more of this vitamin D, that they themselves can activate that, what we call vitamin D, that 125-OHD, this little compound that's floating around the blood. Well, it's that compound, 25-OHD. The body, the breast tissue can say, hey, I need more of this hormone. So let me take this precursor, let me make it, let me activate it. So they were surprised. They said, it's not just the kidney that activates, that makes vitamin D a hormone, but many parts of the body can do it. But what's the catch there? You have to have the precursor. In other words, if you don't have enough of the vitamin D, you can't produce the hormone. So the body is all the time calculating, what am I going to use this little vitamin? If I got a lot of vitamin D, I can use it for everything. I can use it to protect the heart, to boost immunity. I'm going to show you, if you have enough, you actually make a natural antibiotic. I was talking to someone in this cafeteria, and they said they had a bad cold. I said, take vitamin D. She said, oh, but I thought vitamin C helped. It does. Vitamin C is great. But with vitamin D, you make your own antibiotic if you have vitamin D. But you're not going to make your antibiotic if you don't have enough vitamin D, because what's the body doing? The body's saying, I got to save vitamin D for where I really need it. Where is the most, we forget. The body is always calculating, how can I best use these few little nutrients you give me? There's only about 40 nutrients, out of which we make 10,000 compounds, but so many of us don't have the 40 nutrients in order. If we don't have vitamin D in order, the body says, oh, well, my greatest priority is what? To survive another few minutes. Immediate survival depends on the blood calcium being very stable. You will die quickly if your blood calcium gets too high or too low. The body puts a lot of attention on that, and vitamin D is necessary to absorb calcium. So it says, most important thing for vitamin D, absorb calcium, keep blood stable. So if you have a little bit of vitamin D, that's what the body does with it. If you have a little bit more, it says, okay, now it would be really good if we could also support the heart muscle, for example, if we could also reduce proliferation of cancer and regulate those cells. So it titrates and it meters out, and it's the exact same thing with vitamin K. When you don't give your body enough of it, it decides what's the most important thing. And we tend to forget that there's such infinite intelligence in the body. For example, you know how many cells you have? Like 60 trillion. And every second, each cell does over 1,000 things. So you go like that in 1,000 actions within one cell. And there's 60 trillion of them. So you have this massive, and every cell knows what every other cell is doing. So it's a massive network of intelligence that doesn't ask for too much from us, but the nutrients are a really big help, and it does ask for sunlight. And if we don't get sunlight, then it is a very good idea to take vitamin D. So the body is doing its magic, and if we give it the nutrients, it will be able to make us a lot happier. Vitamin D is powerful because it is a hormone, and what happens is you take the sunlight, we take cholesterol, or a type of cholesterol, and we make this thing called vitamin D. It goes to the liver, and then it's processed there, then it goes to the kidney, and then it comes out making this hormone. And for years they said, oh, the kidney's the only place that activates this hormone. Now they know it's not true. Now they know the breast tissue can activate it, the prostate can activate it, the whole body. Many organs can produce this active hormone, and this active hormone has many, many impacts. But you can't produce it if you don't have the substrate, which comes from the sun or from supplementation. Now, there'll be a quiz in a minute, but everybody got that? That's why it's such big news. That's why it's so interesting, because it's not like a vitamin like we think of. Active hormonal vitamin D, that's the active vitamin D, is produced not in the kidney, but also in the colon, prostate, breast, and other tissues. So all over the body, you're taking the thing that's made from sun and making a hormone from it. And it's the only hormone that really can be made from a nutrient. So you say, well, look, I don't got the sunlight stuff, so then you take the vitamin D, and you can make the hormone too. And so it's the only hormone that really you can affect by your eating patterns or your supplement patterns. You can directly affect. We deal with bone health. I run the Center for Better Bones. I help people all over the world actually who want to maximize their bone health. People who say, look, I don't want to be taking these drugs. I want to figure out what's happening with my bone. And the vitamin D story, of course, is very big with bone. The research is showing, in the early days, they did a whole bunch of studies with vitamin D, but they used very low dose. Remember, up to a few years ago, we thought vitamin D was toxic. We said, oh, all you can use is 400 units. Anybody remember that, hearing that vitamin D might be toxic? Yeah. That's especially that was an old story, and the studies would use just 400 units. Now, you know how much vitamin D you actually use every day? Now researchers have looked into it, 4,000 units. You use 4,000 units a day, and so we depend on that from sunlight. So these studies, these old studies, they said, okay. They looked at all these old studies on bone. And when they did bone, what were they always thinking about? Calcium. They give very high dose of calcium, and they give a little bit of vitamin D. Usually they'd give 400 units. Sometimes they gave 800. This study, people taking 7 to 800, but these were people taking actually, usually it was 400. Really, that's really a little bit wrong. It was from 400 to 800 units, and most of them were 400. Even with that tiny dose of vitamin D, studies over the years have shown a 25% decrease in bone fractures just with that low level of vitamin D. And any drug therapy, these drugs you see, a lot of them don't do much better than 25, 35%, and they have so many side effects. So this is just even a low-dose vitamin D. Then, in we at our work, we looked at studies that used either higher dose vitamin D or actually measured the blood level. What you're going to see tonight, what you're going to learn is that people respond differently to vitamin D. You could be taking 5,000 units and have a 50 level, and someone else could take 5,000 and still have a 30 level. Or there could be someone, I saw someone in the other class this morning was only on 2,000 and they had a 50 level in the middle of winter. There's a lot of individuality. So what you want to do is you want to measure the blood level. And we know we're looking for a 50 to 60. And this is the second sheet that we got together for you, which actually tells you what test to use and what level you're looking for. So you're looking for a 50 to 60 level. And when you get that, then you see much better fracture reduction. That's where you're seeing like a 50 to 60% fracture reduction. I've written on this, and we published it in the medical journal, and it's also in this. We're going to talk about this pH test kit I produced. If anyone ever, and it's on my website too, if you want to look at that. So there's a lot more potential for vitamin D if you get a therapeutic dose. If you take too little, it's not going to help you. So, when they looked at all these studies on vitamin D and calcium, when they actually looked at people who used at least 700 to 800 units and whose blood levels got to a sufficient rate, they had a 32% reduction in vertebral fractures and a 43% in hip fractures. This is a study in France. It's a double-blind controlled study, really fascinating, a dramatic reduction in fractures. This was people in nursing homes. Again, they just used 700 to 800. They did not use high-level vitamin D, but it was enough to reduce fracture. There are many other nutrients that help, like vitamin K is one of my favorite nutrients. Just like you're hearing about vitamin D now, the next decade you're going to hear about vitamin K, particularly K2. You know, there's just to digress for a second. There's two types of vitamin K. One is K1 from plants, you know, the green leafy vegetables. So we always say try to get 2 cups of vegetables for lunch, 2 for dinner. That's where you get that nice vitamin K. But there's also another form of vitamin K called K2, and that K2 is produced by bacteria. And so things like fermented cheese, things like sauerkraut, things like a thing called natto in Japan, fermented soybeans, very high in vitamin K. Later, if we have time, we'll talk about it, because vitamin K works with vitamin D. It helps bone, and it also is the one nutrient that prevents arterial calcification. It is necessary to activate a protein that prevents arterial calcification. So you hear about all this stuff, don't take calcium, it hardens the arteries. You get heart attacks. Well, that's because they're giving people lots of calcium without the other nutrients, without the magnesium, without the vitamin K. You'll soon see there's going to be a test for vitamin K2 status, and that's going to be the test for arterial calcification without having to go in there and look and see take an X-ray or do a CAT scan. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. And then think about it, right? Just like we evolved in sunlight, we evolved eating a lot of rotten food. Imagine, we don't have all this sanitation, we ate more ferments. In fact, some of the greatest foods are ferments. Yogurt is a way to store milk when you don't have refrigerators. Buttermilk is another way to use milk that's rotten. Cheese was a way to store milk. You know, so we developed through our evolution all kinds of foods that were involved with ferments, and our gut really needs a lot of ferments. In fact, if you want a good note, you have more DNA of bacteria than you have humans. In other words, you are a walking compost heap. And so it's very good to cultivate all these ferments. And vitamin K is, and to such an extent, and this is going to be gross, it's probably right after dinner, but you've seen these, I'm not going to go into that. I was going to go into the fecal transplants, but we won't go into that right now. We'll stick with the vitamin D. So, And somebody looked at vitamin D. The Japanese, the Japanese looked at B vitamins, and they said they took people who had strokes, just people who had strokes. They gave them B vitamins. You know, when you have strokes, you tend to fall a lot afterwards, and a lot of fractures. They just gave these people B vitamins, and they reduced fracture by 75% among these stroke patients. And again, we see, so D isn't the only thing. All the nutrients are important. We must give our body everything that it needs, and particularly the more ill we are, the more we should really pay attention. So falling, here's a really interesting thing. They gave little amounts of vitamin D, just like 800 units of vitamin D to people in nursing homes and people who were ill. They gave them just 800 units of D, and they found that the fractures decreased dramatically within 2 months. So they're saying, how can this be? How can you reduce fracture in 2 months? You can't build new strong bones in 2 months. Why was it? What's that? People did not fall because there's vitamin D receptors. Vitamin D plays an important role on muscle, actually on muscle itself. And it increases the muscle strength, the muscle activity, it increases balance. So it was so dramatic that people fell less. So within a very short period of time, they were fracturing less. In fact, a 49-50% reduction in fracture in a 12-week duration, which is amazing. So if you know people, especially as we get older, tend to lose our balance. It's a very, very dramatic thing to prevent falls. You will not fracture largely if you don't fall. Most fractures are caused by falls. And so I was just talking to my friend here who teaches Tai Chi. That's a great thing because you learn balance, to do exercises that maintain balance. Mindful ones are even great. To do the nutrients that help you keep your muscles strong and help you prevent falls will go a long way to prevent fracture. Here's the muscle story. Muscle cells have receptors for the active form of vitamin D, so that hormone, muscles can use it and they need it, and it maintains the function of muscle fibers. So right away, within 2 months, people are falling less. Such a wonderful thing to know about. The cancer risk, there's been a lot of studies. This is Garland, Cedric Garland. He has a big website called SunArc, which I'm going to give you the reference to. He's looked at this for many, many years, but they say they've seen when they put all these studies together, you need at least a 40 to 60 Ng level to prevent and treat a number of cancers. And they're even saying for breast cancer to go higher, to go to 80. Now, I haven't talked to them about this. We know native people have a 50. They're saying even go a little higher with breast cancer. We know 100 is off the Richter scale, but they're saying maybe 80. And you see the higher level of vitamin D, the lower level of cancer. And it's what a simple, wonderful thing to do. What an easy thing to do. As far as heart goes, the heart is a muscle that's weakened by the lack of, by weak muscles. Vitamin D helps to correct those muscles. Vitamin D also helps to maintain blood pressure. In fact, they have lowered blood pressure just with tanning booths because you can produce if you have the right UVB lights, low pressure UVB, that sunlight exposure, that is perfectly fine. And it's a very excellent thing to also lower blood pressure, which helps the heart. And vitamin D level is inversely associated with heart attacks, strokes, high blood pressure, and death from heart disease. And the data looks like this. The U.S. study found that heart attacks to be twice as common in patients with low vitamin D. So they took people who had heart attacks, they just started looking at the vitamin D levels, and people who didn't have heart attacks. In this case, low levels, they're talking about 20 or below. We think anything, the new value is anything below 32 is inadequate or deficient. But they were thinking of people, we would say start out with the simplest things. Always start with, you don't want to have high blood pressure. It's so much stress on the vessel. You want to correct it, but if you can do some natural things, like eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, have a lot of potassium in your diet, take the vitamin D, and maybe you can work and find out, do your exercise. See, I can get off this medicine, or I can work with my doctor to reduce it. We don't want to have hypertension, but it's a new age when we can bring nutritional adequacy. We're going to have a lot less of these diseases. If we already have the disorder, then we slowly work to rebuild function. And the doctors are just doing their best. I always joke about doctors. Any doctors here? I always joke because they're way too busy. They're way too busy trying not to kill people with those drugs.
I
So they have to. They don't have time to study, and they don't have time to learn all this new stuff. And the other thing you got to realize is the business of medicine is very tough. They don't have time to take care of people because the business is so complicated itself, and there's so many legalities, so many complicated situations. So you have to be your own best advocate. You have to be the one in charge. You have to be the does the research, because you can't expect them to know everything under the sun. And frankly, but they're caring about something else. You got to care about yourself. It's the most important thing. A wonderful friend of mine, Tricia Torrey. Anybody heard of Tricia Torrey? She's right in town. She's got a book, Misdiagnosis. She was This is another case of a woman stood up, said, I can make a difference. She was told. She called me one day. She said, Susan, you won't believe it. They say I've got cancer. I said, you're kidding. Yeah, she had a lump here. She had a little lump. She went to the doctor. This is a wicked cancer. You've got to do chemo. You're going to die within a short period of time. She said, you're kidding. I feel perfectly fine. It can't be. So she was a publicist, and she was smart enough to say, geez, I got to look into this. So she started talking to her friends. She started going to different doctors. She started getting different opinions. She eventually went to NIH. That was a fatty tumor she had. It was not a cancer. She spent all of her life savings, except her retirement, proving that she did not have cancer. And she went on to start a whole new profession, which is health advocates. And if you've ever been in a hospital, you know the importance of having an advocate, because you need someone who's thinking clearly, trying to help you understand the system. Tricia Torrey, and her book is Misdiagnosis. Her website is Misdiagnosis, and her book is it's Torrey, something like What Your Doctor Never Told You. I wrote a blog on her and it's very dramatic. Her passion is because she had that really big experience, and she was pissed. She was pissed. She had to spend all that money and go through all that torment to prove she didn't have a cancer. And the point of it is, you must be your best advocate. Everyone's doing what they can, but only you. You have the most concern about you, and it's your responsibility to learn and figure out how to manage. And this is like, if you say your vitamin D won't, if your doctor won't test vitamin D, you say, doctor, goodbye. I'm going to find another doctor. There's lots of ways to take control. And we'll even talk about how you can get self-vitamin D tests if you have to. So they found heart attacks to be twice as common amongst people who had low vitamin D levels. And an administration of vitamin D, or even from tanning, was shown to not only reduce blood pressure, but restore insulin sensitivity and lower diabetes, lower cholesterol. The data on diabetes is really very impressive, too. And like the U.S. NHANES, anybody hear of NHANES? It's a big survey. They do thousands of people of the U.S. population. They go out and take blood, see what's going on with people, to know how our nutritional status is. Caucasians with higher vitamin D levels had 1/4 the risk of diabetes as those with the lowest levels. So they took the population like this, and they divided into vitamin D ranks. So people with the lower quarter as opposed to the higher quarter, 1/4 of a difference. Now this is a gross study. I mean, it's just looking at huge numbers, but even 25% reduction is pretty neat, considering that about 25% of our adults have diabetes, and the rate it's continuing, everyone will have diabetes in the next few decades. So we've really got to do something about this, and we've got to certainly straighten up our diet, certainly deal with sugar and all these denatured foods, but the vitamin D can be just a really big help. Autoimmune disease. I work a lot with autoimmune disease. I've been blessed to work with a very famous physician in Virginia who has a wonderful program for autoimmune disease. If you know people who have these illnesses, vitamin D is one part of it. Vitamin D deficiency is clearly now linked to rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, periodontal disease, and many other, which isn't always autoimmune, many other autoimmune disease. So to keep that immune system working well, to keep it happy, you know, the immune system is really circulating intelligence. It's little bits of your brain. Your brain is throughout the whole body. And the immune system are these cells, or little brains that go around and say, hey, is there a foreign invader? Should I attack it? Hey, where do I need to repair? The immune system repairs the body. If we repaired perfectly, we wouldn't age, we wouldn't fracture, we wouldn't have any problems. So we want to enhance the ability of the immune system to repair the body. Vitamin D is one of those agents that does that. It's a very excellent thing. The nervous system. How many people have heard of seasonal affect disorder? Yeah, or maybe even had it. You say, look, I feel crappy in the winter. How many people feel better when the sun comes out? Yeah, we all notice it right away. Happy. Right. It affects the emotional levels. And they know now that the seasonal affect disorder, I'm really sorry about this thing. Seasonal affect disorder is greatly is greatly improved with vitamin D. So it's one of those many simple things you can do. Yeah. There's a couple different mechanisms. You see the sun. Right. Bright light therapy you cannot produce vitamin D from it. There are some vitamin D lamps that have the spectrum. You see, remember the sun has like so many spectrums. It's only one tiny frequency. But other frequencies make us feel good too. Just the brightness of the light. So there's, like I use a bright light in my office in the dark days just to brighten it up, and that makes you feel better. But the vitamin D has to be a particular spectrum that you don't get. Yeah. Sunscreen totally blocks it. I don't have the data here, but even a 20 sunscreen will block the vast majority of vitamin D. So the recommendation is, to get at least a half an hour or so of sunlight without sunscreen. If you want to protect your face, because we do get a lot of damage and faces exposed, that's one thing. But to get some amount of vitamin D, I like to lay on your backside out there in the sun for a little bit. Something is part of your skin. You say, well, that you might not expose so much, but the sunscreen will block it. And windows block it. You have to have direct sunlight exposure. Clothes block it. Arms. Well, no, it's just because we wear short, because we aren't so used to running around nude. I mean, if you ran around nude, it would be better. But because we accept that we can run without shirts on, but you want it exposed. Your whole body can absorb vitamin D. Go to the beach. Like, you want to be like those Brazilians. I love it. You go to Brazil. I mean, I don't care if you weigh 500 pounds. You still got your bikini on. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's what, you got to get out there and get that sunlight. It's always amazing. I've been shy for that, but I'm going to change my ways here. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, they have been found linked to lower levels of vitamin D. And this is interesting. Even in utero, of course you need vitamin D in utero, and your mother provides it to you. Vitamin D deficiency during conception increases, they have lower bone density when they're born, and actually this interesting little study showed that schizophrenia was more common in people whose mothers had low vitamin D. So there's some of these researchers who report on Grassroots Health have looked at pregnancy. Bruce Hollis looked at pregnancy, found out that these women need at least 4,000 units to have their fetus get enough vitamin D. And black women need much more. Dark-skinned people need much more vitamin D than light-skinned people. We'll talk about that. So, how many people are vitamin D deficient? How many people had their vitamin D tested here? Okay. What were your levels? Anybody want to report? So, if your doctor says it's low, it's way low. So remember, you get out your piece of paper and you write that down. Or you say, Doc, give me the... That's right. Good. Well, you want to keep the copy, and you want to also then write on that copy how much vitamin D you were taking. Say your doctor said you were 20. You write down, my level's 20, and I was on, let's say, 400 units or 1,000 units, whatever. And you mark the time of year, because you want to know your level at the end of the summer, which is going to be the highest you have, and then you want to know your level about now. That's why I gave this lecture now, because February, March, you want to measure your level, because that's going to be the lowest. You want to be the same all year round, so you got to adjust your dose. Yes. So there's 8 weeks. Yeah. Here, this interesting story. When they discovered that vitamin D was so important, when they discovered there was a vitamin D, what did they do? Hector DeLuca at the University of Wisconsin said, this is a place to make a lot of money. So what he did is he changed that molecule around and made a drug. That drug is called D2. That's what your doctor gave you. That drug is what insurance companies pay for. It is not nearly as effective as natural D3, and it actually displaces D3 in the body. So your doctor, what they're giving you is they're giving you 50,000 a week, which is 7,000 a day of the D2. But if you're smart, you say, thank you very much, doctor. I'm going to go down to Wendy's. I'm going to buy 7,000 units, out of my own pocket, of natural vitamin D3, and take that 7,000 a day that's the same thing as 50,000 a week, for those 8 weeks, and then go get retested. D3 is the natural form of vitamin D that the body produces. D3 is what we want. D3 is what's natural. D2 is a synthetic that used to be a drug. And it used to be patented, and they made a ton of money on it, but now the patent has run out. But they still make a ton of money on it, and the doctors don't take the trouble to get people natural D3. What?
I wondered about it.
Well, you got it figured out now. Who else had some levels? What's your levels? Yeah.
I was 43. I was, 40.
What time of year?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember, but now when I was tested a couple of weeks ago, I asked because
Yeah.
the doctor doesn't tell you what he said. I asked, and it's a big deal. So it was down to 40.
Okay. So what you remember, the time of year and how much you were on. And I'm going to tell you in a minute, if you're 40, how much it take to get to be 50. I can show you that.
I'm taking 5,000 milligrams.
Okay.
I don't take it every day. I feel that it's like.
Okay, we'll use your case a little bit later. We'll use your case. We'll use your case. We got another half an hour, so we're gonna get into the dosing. Yeah, but I want to. No. Yeah. Exactly. If you look at Michael Hollick has got a book. Michael Hollick discovered the vitamin D, the metabolites of vitamin D, and he has calculated it. There's several for every area, and no, it's from about April. I mean, June is the best when that sun is very high. But even if you take between April and October, as long as your shadow is shorter than you are, you'll produce vitamin D. There's a spectrum. A small spectrum of UVB is like 390 to 420. But no, it's not. It is. We have about 4 or 5 months we can't produce, or maybe 5, bordering on 6. But the rest of the year we can. At this latitude, anything above Atlanta, you can't produce much in the winter. Yeah. This is a really important thing. Okay, let's just talk about that, and then we're going to finish the slides. There's a whole there's a whole new age coming, and that new age. Now, girls, don't interrupt my talk. I'll get hypertensive. Wait. I'm trying. So here's what happens. This is a whole new world. We're talking about, can you get your vitamin D tested? You can actually, in every state but New York, you can go online and order any test you want at half price without a doctor. And on my website, I have a link to this. It's called, one of the labs that does it is Direct Labs. They have a contract with LabCorp. You send them their $59. They send you a script for vitamin D. You go to a station. They tell you, go over to this part of town and have it measured. It's very slick. It's wonderful. You can test anything you want, practically. New York State, of course, because they're trying to protect stupid citizens of New York, they won't let you do it. Or you have to then, but this particular Direct Labs has got around New York by paying an extra $20. So instead of paying $59, if you go to another site and pay $59 plus $20, you can do it in New York. So that's one possibility. You say, I'm going to do it myself. If you look at grassrootshealth.net and this other group, the Vitamin D Council, they have studies going on where people sign up to participate, and they can sometimes get you lower amounts of testing. There's lower cost for the testing. There's actually a lab that's developed a stick, a vitamin D prick stick. I have started to use those because I try to get people to have their insurance pay for them, but it doesn't often happen, or they'll only do one test and not do other tests. So you probably do have to take that responsibility. If you have to go to if you go to your doctor and your doctor says, well, I'll order it, but you're going to have to self-pay, then you call the laboratory and you talk to the manager. You say, I'm self-paying for this, and I would like a good price. In fact, I would say, and I would like the Medicare price, which is probably $20. What happens with laboratories is they charge like $150 for the test, but they don't get $150. They get whatever the insurance pays. So if you have to self-pay, either go to Direct Labs or negotiate with them. They'll negotiate. They'll say, hey, okay, I'm self-paying. You're guaranteed cash, but give me a better price. Because the test should be about $50, $60, yeah. Well, you can go to directlabs.com. If you go, my website. You got to have a doctor. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, but you could get your dentist or anybody or chiropractor could write it up. Anybody could write it up, but to get insurance coverage, you have to have a reason for it. And my proposal is, Obama just wouldn't listen. But my health care proposal was universal vitamin D testing, because then you would find out what it was. But the long and the short of it is, you can, if you do that, if you go to the dentist and say, hey, write me up this vitamin D thing, then you be sure to talk with that lab, because that lab's likely to charge $150, $170 for that test. You want to really negotiate with them. Or go to Direct Labs. You go to my website, betterbones.com. We got a link to Direct Labs. You call them and say, I'm in New York, and they'll send you to yet another website, and you can get the test for $59 plus $20. Yeah. That's it. You say you got pain, I got bone aches, I got fatigue, my teeth are falling out. Yeah. It's really a new age. So if you are getting tests that are not paid for, you negotiate with that lab, or you go to Direct Labs, and don't pay the full price, because it's laboratories that really skim off a ton of money. It's not right. It's not right. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. The vitamin D deficiency. 1 billion people worldwide, half of all Americans. Dark-skinned people need 6 times more sunlight exposure than light-skinned people. And you've all heard the story. When we left the savannas, we were all dark-skinned. We went up north. We stayed in Norway there, and what happened to us? We all got rickets. And so the only people that lived, the only people that reproduced were people that had a mutation to be white. We're like pale skins, and we're pale skins because we need that to absorb. That's how white skin evolved. We were all started out black, but we either died, or only the people that mutated and we're all a bunch of mutants, all these Caucasians. And then we could absorb the vitamin D, so then we didn't die from rickets. Yep. It looks like it has a lot to do with hypertension, with diabetes, with heart disease. There's so many reasons that dark-skinned people, between the health care and diet and all this, but vitamin D is one big one. It's one, and it's a very great campaign. People like in Saudi Arabia, when these Arabic women, when these Muslim women come to live in northern climates like England, they all got all these problems, all these bone problems, all these fractures, all this pain. Because you get a lot of pain, bone pain with vitamin D, because they're all covered up. And there's not that brilliant sunlight of the deserts. Half of Europeans are known to be vitamin D deficient. And so, how much do we need? Healthy men seem to use, this study was done by Robert Heaney. Robert Heaney was a great calcium researcher. He's very famous. I saw him recently, a couple years ago at a lecture. He's practically crying, saying, I got to apologize to you all. I spent my life studying calcium, and we didn't pay enough attention to vitamin D, telling people to take all this calcium, which has really not been shown to help bone and not to be that beneficial, and now being shown to be adverse, that you can actually calcify your joints and your arteries if you take too much of it, and not paying attention to vitamin D. And he has now become a great vitamin D advocate. He did the research, he's a big-time researcher, to find out that you use 3,000 to 5,000. This is men. Somebody asked me that earlier. I said, women don't exist. And these researchers, I don't know what they're thinking of, but anyway, he picked men, but so women, it's the same story. 3,000 to 5,000. Oop, doop, doop. So this is a really important thing. This vitamin. Oop, oop, oop. Come on. I lost my. A daily. So now, if daily, is this how much your body uses? Let's say roughly 4,000 units. And all of the stuff we use in the winter is from what we accumulate in the summer. And if we don't accumulate enough in the summer, if you're out in New Jersey in T-shirts and shorts in June, you can produce 10,000 units in 25 minutes. When your skin turns slightly pink, that's when you know you've produced a lot. But, so every day, if you got 10,000 units, you save up a lot, but it's generally not enough to take people through the winter. That's why this is the time of year you want to measure. You want to say, just jot down, I'm on 2,000 units, let me see what my score is. And we do have to do something about making these tests more available, because you all point up it's ridiculous. You have to do hoops to even get such a simple test like this. If you be sure to sign up on my mailing list, because I'll find some way we can get around this. It's not right. Maybe the sticks. Maybe get the sticks that you do at home. Yeah. Vitamin D is stored in several different tissues. It's stored a lot in fat. And this is an interesting thing, that fat, people with a lot of adipose tissue, the vitamin D goes in there and it's hard to get it out. So heavy people need more vitamin D because it gets sequestered in the cells. It's not stored in the liver. It's not toxic in the liver. Well, it'll store in the muscle and other tissues. It's very, vitamin D is it's very unique. Some people have receptors that bind vitamin D. That's why the testing is the thing to do. I've seen clients that were on very little and they had 50 levels. It's rare, and I've seen other clients much more commonly that are taking a bunch of it and are still at 20. It has, and I see in families, like if you get tested and say, geez, I was on 2,000 units and I'm still low, have your family tested because it's a genetic thing about binding of vitamin D and all kinds of genetic traits. So it's I see a lot in families, so it's good to pay attention to the family. So this 3,000 to 5,000 units, and then, now this is what you're probably most interested in. This is the whole thing. So how do you measure it? This is the blood test. Ooh, I just keep, what? This one's not being fair to me here. This little blood test, we've given you the sheet that has the information on the blood test, right? And you're looking for a 50 to 60 level. Gene Paul, my really lovely assistant from the university, he developed this nice little chart. And you can see this is where you're talking rickets. Anything below 20, you're talking rickets. To 30 is really inadequate, or we say deficiency. This whole thing is deficient. Barely adequate at 32 to 40. You protect bone. You absorb calcium. You don't get deformities of bone from that, but you don't get to optimum level till you're 50 to 60. So when you go to the doctor, you want to end up with a 50 to 60. Now the new researchers are saying 80 if you have breast cancer because it helps to boost your immunity against breast cancer. You don't want over 100. You don't need over 100. You don't want over 100. I, for example, have to take about 5,000 in the winter to come up with a 50, and about 3,000 in the summer a day. Anybody? Yeah. Anybody have their level? Yeah. When you have too much vitamin D, when the blood level gets too high, it causes you to absorb too much calcium. And so your blood calcium gets high. The body doesn't like blood calcium being high, so what does it do? It puts it in the urine. When it puts it in the urine, it stresses the kidney because the kidney has to deal with that, and you can get calcification of the kidney. It can lead to kidney disease. And people get other immediate problems like nausea or something. It's very hard to take too much vitamin D. You have to take, the research even in the Merck textbook is 40,000 IUs for several weeks. I mean, it's not, but they always cite a case of toxicity. There's very few cases of toxicity. But one of them was in Africa. They put vitamin D in an oil, and they were shipping it around, and some people stole it, and they used it as cooking oil, and so they got very vitamin D toxic. But that was decades ago, and that's the study that's always cited how dangerous it is. It's much. I mean, this is very rare. This is very, very common. So this little chart, you keep in mind, you're looking to 50 to 60, and that's that same information we wrote on that sheet. Yeah. It really doesn't matter. Vitamin D is such a simple thing. They either make it of lanolin or they make it of fish oils, or they make it synthetic out of yeast. We like the D3 out of lanolin or fish oils. You don't even have to know what form it is. I personally, let me see. I think we've got some examples here. So how to optimize the level? Sunlight, like you mentioned. Then you want to think about. But this is the problem with sunlight here. You know where this picture was taken? No kidding. This is Fulton, right? This is that great big storm a while ago, up a couple years back in Fulton. This is where we live. There's a little bit of a problem here. So, and actually, this is very fascinating too. In the 20s, they actually put vitamin D in Schlitz beer. They said, great idea. I think they should have. I don't know why they stopped doing it, but we'd have a lot less vitamin D deficiency. Well, you see, you need vitamin D essentially to absorb calcium. You need to have adequate calcium, but the new research on calcium is you need 1,200 milligrams of calcium with diet and supplements. In bone health, we give people 500 or 600 milligrams of supplements, and the rest they get in their diet. You don't have to take the vitamin D with it. You just want to take all your nutrients, and at the same time, you want to take vitamin D. You can take it at different times of the day. Yeah, yeah. Well, see, that's a mistake. See, the 1,200, girls, I'm going to have to slap your hands. Will you stop talking in class? Please. I'm trying to get this thing done. Okay, so you're so cute. So here's what happens. The 1,200D is way more than you need. You don't want the 1,200D in supplements. That's when you're getting hardening of the arteries. I mean, calcium, 1,200 calcium is way too much. The calcium dose is 1,200 with diet and supplements. You've seen the news saying, don't take calcium, you get heart attack. That's because they're giving way too much calcium, and they're giving it without vitamin K. You want magnesium and vitamin K, particularly MK7. If you go to my website, I've got a thing called 20 key bone nutrients, and you can see, you want about 500 calcium supplements, 500 magnesium. You want MK7, the form of vitamin K, like at least 100 micrograms. We use 200, and then you want your vitamin D to your precise level. And if you can't get a precise level, the government has declared 4,000 safe for everyone. We know that the average person, 2,000, will get you to that 32 level. So if you want to take a safe side, you might say, I'll do 4,000. And hopefully you can get tested at some point to find out 4,000 in the winter, maybe less in the summer. The government has declared 4,000 safe for everyone. So you know that's a... So, right. Yeah. Okay, so we don't have to guess anymore. You go to the doctor and say, doctor, just say I got osteoporosis. Tell me I got osteoporosis. And then they'll measure your vitamin D. You will know. And okay, so just to tell you this, say your level is 30. And you say, gee, I know I really want a 50. So you want it to go 30, you want 40, 50, you want it 20 higher. For every 1,000 units of vitamin D you take, it'll probably raise it 10 points. So if you say, I'm at 30, I want to be 50, you know you got to take 2,000 more. So if you know your vitamin D level, you can kind of gauge how much you've got to take to get to the right level. If you go to the doctor and your doctor says, you always see what time of year he told you, and what. So let's take somebody's case. Somebody have their vitamin D level tested? 29. What time of year? Just now. So 29 in the winter. It's kind of, you're going to be lower next month and maybe until April. So 29, and how much were you taking? None. So this is interesting. None. So you're 29, and you aren't really you could be much worse, but you're 29. We'd say like 39, 49, 59. We'd like you, so we'd take 3,000 units to bring that up. Now, if you go to a doctor, the doctors that are savvy might say, we don't want to wait. We don't want to take a slow building up. Remember, why take 3,000 a day? If you're using 3,000 a day, you'll never build stores. So they would give you 7,000 a day for 8 weeks and tell you to retest, and you'd probably be like a 50 or 60. So you could easily do 5,000 a day, and then, yes. No, you might, I'd probably in your case do 5,000 a day all winter, and then maybe like I do 3,000 in the summer. But you see, you got the gist of it? Yeah. You can take them at the same time, yeah. It's better to take them, and it's better to take them with fat in the meal because they're fat soluble. So, yeah, you don't have to spread them out throughout the day. Let's see what else we got, and then we'll answer all the questions. So if you can't drink enough beer, then you can eat fish. And if this fish isn't appetizing, I'll tell you, I don't want to make you stop eating fish forever. I don't know where we got that picture, but it's disgusting. Okay. So this, then there's supplements. My favorite is Carlson's cod liver oil. It has 1,200D, 3,000 omega-3 fats. It's delicious tasting. Any of you ever have cod liver oil? Yummy. This is lemon flavored. Or you can do, there's a whole world of vitamin D pills. So Wendy's got a whole bunch of this stuff. Cod liver oil is how they originally prevented rickets with just a little teaspoon. I take a big, nice tablespoon because you get those omega-3 fats, 3,000 milligrams. The omega-3 fats are really terrific for health. Because I want the omega-3 fats. I want the fish. No. Those are, this you see is just, vitamin D tablets are just vitamin D. They might make it from lanolin. They don't have the fish oils in it. Separate. Then you take your vitamin D in a tasty form. There was a guy who put vitamin D in chocolate. It was a friend of mine. This old guy, he was really funny. He put vitamin D in chocolate. They went to a nursing home in Romania. They gave these nursing home people this. They gave them bread with. This was like 10 years ago. Nobody believed it. 5,000 units of D in this bread. These people increased bone density like 20, 30, 40%. These old people. Right. So here's how it goes. If you get your vitamin D tested, girls, if you get your vitamin D tested today, then what you have to do is in 8 weeks you will see the peak. But in 4 weeks you can see pretty much the peak. But usually what they do is say, take it 8 weeks back and come back and get tested. How many people do I see the doctor says, oh, you're low. Take this 50,000 units a week for 8 weeks. They take it and then they stop doing anything. A year later they're all low again. So you need to follow up. You need to figure out your summer dose and your winter dose and stay on it. If you lived in Florida, I just recently lectured in Florida. In Florida, they did doctors and medical students. These people were all vitamin D deficient because they spent all their time inside. And have you ever been in Florida in the summer? It's like friggin' hell down there. It's so hot. Yeah. So you ask people, do you go outside? They say, not in the summer. So in the winter, it's right. So it's all sunlight. We can live in a sunny place and still not get sunshine. If you make it a point to right. And so just it's sunlight. They say like a half an hour. Sunlight is such a wonderful thing. Who wouldn't just run out at the first ray of sun because it's such a glorious thing. So you figure out your doses. And you will not, if you have a lot of vitamin D, you will not produce it from sunlight. The body shuts off production. Between the that's fine. Like they have sublinguals, they have all kinds of oils, all kinds of tablets. So you just want to test to make sure it's working. But vitamin D is generally pretty easy.
When I look at the ingredients, it's lactose.
Well, they have to put. It's a little sugar. They have to make some kind of little sugar pill to put it in.
So am I better off taking liquid?
Well, here's what I think about vitamin D. I just get a good brand, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be any. Well, vitamin D is very cheap. Yeah, so it's fine. And but jot down what you're taking and how much and the type. So when you get your test, if for any reason it doesn't work, you say, hey, that type, I'm not using that type again. I'm going to use this. We know. They're pretty standardized. They're pretty standardized. It loses potency over the years if it's expired, but outside of that, yeah. Huh? Yeah. Michael Hollick, the major vitamin D researcher who discovered these metabolites, he spends half his time in zoos because these animals are getting all these problems because they don't have vitamin D. And he discovered it with his own daughter's lizard or something. It started fracturing, And he spends a lot of time consulting at zoos because the animals aren't outside anymore. Well, you remember I told you with children, I told you that story, right? Finland, the little kids, when the kids got born, they gave them 2,000 units of D every day for a year. Those children grew up to have like 70% less type 1 diabetes. In fact, one of the major researchers you'll see on grassrootshealth.net says you could eradicate type 1 diabetes in kids if you gave it to them at birth. And so, yeah. Well, I mean to say it's never too young to start. And you go right out today. If you can't be tested, just go take, now it's winter, I would take 4,000 units. And then get it measured if you can. Maybe in the summer you say, well, I'm just going to do 2. There are a few people that can get away with 1. But remember, the government said 4 is safe for everybody. So it's nice if you can test. And it really is kind of offensive that we don't have availability here of a cheap test. It's ridiculous, actually.
So the supplement for 4,000 is safe for everyone year-round?
Yeah. Every healthy person. Right. So, you 2 will probably be enough to protect bone. 3 might do it for some people, get you to a higher level, but yes.
So what are some signs without having to get the diabetes from that were low in vitamin D?
Well, one thing happens, when you're severely low in vitamin D, you get bone pain. Have you ever had bone pain or the muscles, the bone actually swells, some of the cells in there, and actually you'll get bone pain. And people get muscle pain and muscle aches. Like a doctor friend of mine has all this like people with fibromyalgia. Half of these people are vitamin D deficient, and a lot of them respond very well to vitamin D. She had all these aches and pains. I kept saying, look, finally she tested her vitamin. She couldn't believe it was so low. And she said, I feel a lot better. I don't have so many aches and pains. So the aches and pains are really one thing. There is particularly the sternum. So there's a few sensitive points. Anybody know where? I think one in the sternum that is very sensitive if you're vitamin D deficient. Let me think of any other simple ways to tell. Actually, well, fatigue. Yeah, fatigue. So many things can add to fatigue. You can really, since half of the population is vitamin D deficient, you can almost just divide it up. Okay, you're deficient. You're not. Probably you're deficient. So I wouldn't worry about it. And we know, even if you said, well, I'm a little nervous, I only just take 2,000 units. I mean, it's very. The government says 4,000 safe for everybody. In the winter, I think it's a great dose. You might say, well, I'm just going to start out with 2,000. Get tested. So you just go to the doctor and tell them what fatigue they took as a diagnosis. Tell them I got fatigue, I got bone pain, I got muscle pain. Give me the test, doc.
Does it make a difference when you take it during the day, whether you absorb it better in the morning or night?
No, with fat it's absorbed better. Let's see if we got anything else here before we get the rest of our questions. So this is Veith, one of the major researchers. I had a guy at the hospital in Toronto. What a wonderful guy. He began 10 years ago taking 10,000 units himself. Everybody was outraged. How can you possibly do it? Now they're finding that many people need 10,000. It was perfectly safe. He studied it for years and years and years. Here's what he says. In the absence, these trials show that 10,000 units is safe. Is the upper safe level. The government is saying 4. The researchers are saying 10. So you can feel comfort taking. Right. But you know what happens is, when you have higher levels of vitamin D, you do not absorb and you do not use so much of it. In other words, if you're 50 and you say, I want to raise it to 70, it's harder because the body doesn't accelerate at that same rate. It damages organs only through high blood calcium. This is why you're looking at the level, the 100 ng level.
Right, because on chart there it said above 100 was toxic.
Right.
And I was just doing the 1,000 IUs.
Well, look, so what this guy gave lots of people 10,000 units and found that they did not develop high blood calcium and they did not get over the. And what happens is, the more you take and the higher level gets, the less the level rates. The body controls it. It doesn't raise the level sky high. There are a few cases like sarcoidosis, a few rare diseases, like sarcoidosis in particular, which is an autoimmune disease where the body produces too much of the vitamin D hormone, but they're not common. It's always good to mention that, actually. Yeah, let's just see. We only got maybe one more slide. Oh, here's the places. Our site is betterbones.com. If you want to stick around, I'll show you our site, and we can look at how to get the vitamin D test. Grassrootshealth.net. That's the woman who had that breast cancer, who now has a phenomenal series of videos. Practically every week they have a public lecture. You can go get those archives. You can see about vitamin D in pregnancy or vitamin D in MS and cancer. And you can hear her story. It's really dramatic. The Vitamin D Council is another physician who really took charge and has developed a whole another friend of mine, Canal, who I said, why don't you try to raise money? And he's out there, he's got a subscription thing, and he's working on autism now, lots of fascinating research. If you have a question, you just write him and say, hey, Dr. Cannell, tell me, what's the link, do you think? And he'll do a blog on it. He's got people working there. SunArc is Garland, who actually has for a long time looked at why is it that they have so much less MS in southern climates. Why do they have so much less cancer? They've noticed the sunlight gradient, and he's become a major researcher. So these are some good sources. This is just things on your exposure. So let's take a second. You think of your last minute questions, and I'm going to show you how you can get the vitamin D test if you're stumped, outside of the fact that you just fire your doctor and get another one. This is our website here. Let's see here. Let's see if we can go to the home page. Today I was given this lecture, and a woman comes up to me and says, hey, is this doctor in Syracuse? That's like my friend Carolyn Meese. Carolyn Meese, a famous lecturer, right? She travels all over. She's in the airport. She's looking in the bookstore. Some guy pulls up a book, and it's her book, and it's got the picture of her in the back, and he says, I bet this woman in real life doesn't look anything like this picture. Oh, I bet she's all down. Look, it was her. She said, nah, she doesn't look a bit like that picture. This is the same thing as Lily has just doctors in town. So here it is. This is our site, and what we do is, we have all kinds of information on bone health, hundreds of articles. But if you go to the store, this is where you can find the vitamin D testing. Now, there's a couple things I'm really proud of here. I'm proud of our blog, which you can sign up for. If you sign that sheet, we'll give it to you. You can also go here and sign up. We have about 200,000 people that receive this newsletter. People that are interested in knowing the latest on bone health, the latest on vitamin D. Do sign up, and we also tell you what's going on. I'll tell you if I can find a better way to get vitamin D testing. I am very proud also, just while we're scrolling down here, of our. We have a lot of videos which talk about everything from vitamin K to calcium, everything you want to know. We have, of course, I do consultations in town. That's how I earn my living. I help people who want personal consultations with bone health or their health. And in our shop, we have a way to get vitamin D. Now, these first products are produced by the companies I work with. I design these products for them, but that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, here, these are a series of lectures that I've given and interviews. Some of them are free. Some of them are a wonderful little meditation. Meditation is extremely important for calming the nervous system and enhancing health. And then there's a Bone Health 101 class, which is a brand new DVD we did, which really has all the updated data on bone health. And then I'm going to get, what we're doing now is we're producing all these DVDs so people can study themselves how to know if your bone loss is excessive, how to know the medical tests, looking for causes of bone loss, all these self-help things you can do. We have a lot of exercise equipment, and down at the very bottom, we actually have a small foundation, and that foundation is what will offer this test here. Our little store has gotten pretty big over the years. My gosh, here it is. Okay, so this is the Better Bones Foundation, and you can go to here. If you click on here, this Learn More, it'll take you to Direct Labs, and they offer a vitamin D test for $59. They offer they offer everything, but the things we pay a lot of attention to are vitamin D and this marker of bone breakdown. So if you click here, you'll see some information. They'll take it. Well, hey, I think we can probably do it. The K, there's not the test for K2. If you want to learn all about that, there's a fellow called Vermeer, V-E-R-M-E-E-R. He's in the Netherlands. He is a major researcher, and Mercola has a wonderful interview with him on YouTube. Mercola's interview with Vermeer. And Vermeer is developing this test, and it has to do with matrix GLA. That's a particular vitamin K-dependent protein that prevents arterial calcification. And they are going to be able to predict arterial calcification by that matrix GLA. But what he says is, don't worry, if you don't take it, you're deficient, because we don't eat those fermented foods anymore. So we always give people, we always say, take the vitamin K, even if it's just 90 micrograms of MK7. That's a very active form of K2. There's K1 that's produced by plants. There's K2 that's produced by bacteria. The K2 is much more potent and long-lasting. And the vitamin, no, all of vitamin K. We always thought vitamin. You're jumping now. You're going to be in the next century, in the next decade, because yes, because
like this?
Yes, you're going to be just like this. That's what we got to do. Vitamin D has exploded the last 10 years. What's going to explode next year? Next 10 years is vitamin K, because vitamin K, again, is one of those factors we have not paid attention to that was very high in our indigenous environments. We ate a lot of rotten food because that's and a lot of mold and a lot of bacteria. And our body is very accustomed to that. And there's certain proteins that are only activated by vitamin K. And that's one protein that keeps calcium in the bone, called osteocalcin. And it's another protein called GLA matrix in the blood that prevents calcium. So you think about it. How does the body know? Don't fall asleep on me, girl. How does the body, we're almost done. How does the body know it starts calcifying bone? How does it know when to stop calcifying bone? Why isn't the whole body bone? Why don't we calcify our liver and our lungs and all that? We don't, because there's a turn-off switch. And that turn-off switch is dependent on vitamin K2, MK7. And so Vermeer now is developing a test. They're trying to make a simple test. They're trying to make a test everybody can get. They're probably going to end up putting this vitamin K like in aspirin for the people with all these heart concerns. You're going to see a lot of functional foods around it. In Australia already, they're trying to make an oil out of MK7 that people can cook with it. It's a whole new age about understanding. But what's fascinating to me is that these aren't fads. These are things that we evolved. Our genetic machinery needs adequate vitamin D. It needs adequate vitamin K. And we haven't been getting them because of our current lifestyles. So you go to that test is not available. You can get a test for undercarboxylated osteocalcin. You can get a test for the bone part to see is that bone protein that needs vitamin K, is that in good shape? But don't bother with it, because if you're not taking vitamin K, it's going to be low. So you just do some vitamin K. Eat your 2 cups of vegetables for lunch and dinner. Eat fermented cheese. A few ounces of real aged cheese will give you 50 micrograms of K2. And eat sauerkraut, eat fermented foods, but then I certainly take vitamin K. Yeah. Well, we can talk about. Let's state. The bone density tests are fine. They're not. What we know now is you can't predict fracture by density, and so it's one thing to have low density, but it's multiple risk factors that deter fracture, like being low vitamin D, like tending to fall, like using steroids. 20% of all osteoporosis in this country is due to steroids, prednisone, drugs like that people take, antidepressants, many proton pump inhibitors, many things we do put us at risk for bone that may not even affect density so much. Density is important. If there weren't bone density tests, I wouldn't earn a living. Because what happens? People go to the doctor, they get scared to death. Oh, I have this low bone density. Nobody cares about bone health, except the doctor's got you all scared. You care if you fractured, or you care if you see your mother or your grandmother fracture. And the truth is, 1/3 of all women will have a significant fracture. There's no need for it. We want to stay strong and healthy as we age, so it's good. The bone density in that sense is good, because it kind of moves people to do something, but not to do something. Taking drugs is not going to. Well, it's not going to. It scares you, and fear is the most damaging thing to bone. Let me just see if we got anything else going here. So go to Direct Labs so you can. Well, I'll just show you real quick. You can order it online, but if you go someplace else to visit, like your sons or daughters out of state, just order the test and have it there, because New York is really. So you go here. You can look and see. Now this is the Direct Lab site. You can link right up to it. And then once you get here, let's see here how Wendy's machine. It's taking a second to load. Then you just click. Oh, there we go, Facebook. Here you go. It's not exactly what we were looking for here. Yeah. So, yeah, this is it. So, you just call this 800 number, because what they're going to tell you, if you in any other state, you can just go right here, order test. You see this order test right here? You just click this little thing. They're going to tell you. They're going to give you the test that I like, which are just the parathyroid, the vitamin D. See right here, $59. You just click the button. They'll give you a little. You pay your money, and they'll send you a little script to go to LabCorp. Now in New York State, you got to call the number. You got to tell them, look, I'm in New York. They say we can't do it in New York, but they have a way around it. You have to go to another website, pay $20 more, and you can get it. So it'd be $79 in New York. That's what labs can charge for it. That's the retail price. So you want to be careful. If your doctor says you have to sell, what's that? What's that now? What are you talking about? Who are you cursing out back there? Say you're fatigued. Say you got muscle pain. You got bone pain. You got a lot of muscle pain or something like that. So the only thing is the doctor won't know that's a symptom, but you try. So but no, do insist to get the test. And if you have to pay, negotiate with the company. Well, it's been my great pleasure. Are there any last-minute questions? I know. Sign up for the newsletter. Do fill out Wendy's thing so she knows what a wonderful talk this is. So we can thank her for all the effort she does. And I'm happy to answer your last-minute. Yeah. Well, no, it's always a good idea to take magnesium for bone health. We give 600 milligrams of magnesium, 600 milligrams of calcium, the D you need, and at least 100 or 200 micrograms of MK7. On my website here, I have a thing called the 20 key bone nutrients. You can go look them up.
If you wanted to do the comprehensive wellness protocol, does that include none of the vitamin D?
I don't believe so. You have to read more and find out. They do have several. They have hundreds of tests. I just have these on my panel.
Because I know the lab fees are ridiculous.
Yes, if you have to pay.
Insurance co-pays and all that, just to pay.
If you have to pay, it's a much better thing to do.
First, just done auto-
Don't forget to sign up for the blog now, friends. Yeah. Nice to see you. Bye-bye. Take care. Have fun. Sure.
I've been on prednisone for like 12 years
Yeah.
for my rheumatoid.
Yeah.
I take 5 milligrams, which